Gather round the fire, friends. This chilling tale of a truck sale gone horribly wrong will have you on the edge of your seat. It was a spring evening in the small town of Ancaster, Ontario, when Tim Bosma kissed his baby girl goodnight. As his wife Charlene tied it up downstairs, Tim paced back and forth, waiting for two strangers coming to test drive his Dodge Ram pickup. Tim had been trying to sell that truck for months to scrape together some extra cash for his young family. But little did he know, these potential buyers had no intention of buying anything that night. The only thing on their minds was murder. So Tim's waiting and waiting. It's now after 9 p.m. and still no sign of them, although they'd called earlier to say they were running late. Charlene tells Tim he better go along for the test drive. After all, they don't want to just hand over the keys to some strangers. Who knows if they'd even bring it back? Finally, just after 9 o'clock, two sketchy-looking dudes show up out of nowhere. On foot? Weird, right? This is like way out in the boonies. Charlene gives Tim a be careful look as he hops in his truck with the two guys for what was supposed to be a quick spin around the block. But 1 hour passes, then another, and another. No Tim, no truck, no nothing. Charlene's got a real bad feeling in the pit of her stomach. She just knows something ain't right with this situation, so she calls the cops to report Tim missing. The next morning, as the sun peeks over the horizon, officers fan out to search the area near Tim's house. Detectives start digging into Tim's background, trying to figure out what could have happened to this devoted father who had simply vanished into thin air. Now get this, it was Tim's own cell phone records that blew this case wide open. Remember those sketchballs who showed up to supposedly test drive the Dodge truck? Turns out they'd called Tim not once, but twice from a burner cell phone to set up the sale. So cops traced that number to figure out who these mystery men were. And boy, did that number open up a nasty can of worms. After chasing it down, detectives finally get a name, Lucas Bate. But, plot twist, there was no Lucas Bate. That was just an alias. The phone was registered under a fake name with a fake address. But even though the name was bogus, whoever bought it had still used it to call other people with real phone numbers, numbers that could be traced. And those numbers pointed police square to the true identity of Lucas Bate. His real name? Dylan Millard, a spoiled rich kid who was buddies with a low-life drug dealer named Mark Smitch. Now up till then, no one would have ever guessed Millard had anything to do with Tim Bosma's disappearance. I mean, Millard grew up filthy rich. We're talking tens of millions of dollars rich, thanks to his family's airline business. He lived the high life. Luxury cars, prime real estate, you name it. So why would a spoiled trust fund brat ever need to steal a rinky-dink pickup truck? But as detectives dig into Millard's background, they uncover clues that this was no ordinary truck theft. Turns out Dylan Millard was not just living the high roller lifestyle. He was also a serial thrill killer who loved playing twisted games with his victims. A few days before Tim vanished, cops get a call from another guy named Igor, who claimed two sketchy dudes had come to his place to test drive his Dodge truck too. Same deal as Tim. Showed up out of the blue wanting to take it for a quick spin. Thankfully, this Igor guy, who was a big intimidating ex-con type, made these fools bring him along for the ride. And surprise, surprise, guess who those mystery men were? Millard and Smitch. According to Igor, Millard was basically sizing him up during the whole test drive, making creepy comments about his size and if he could overpower him. So clearly this pair had some sinister master plan going on targeting Dodge truck owners. But with big tough Igor, they got cold feet. Unfortunately, sweet family man Tim Bosma made a much easier target. Now once Tim's wife Charlene reports him missing, the whole countryside is on high alert. And it's non-stop front page news. Everyone's looking for either Tim or his black Dodge truck. Just a day later, somebody spots Tim's hot rod parked outside an auto shop an hour away. So the cops race over to scope it out. The minute they peek inside, they see blood. Lots of blood. Smeared all over the seats and floor. This is now officially a homicide investigation. With evidence piling up against him, the cops haul Millard in for questioning. And they find Tim's truck keys right in his pocket, red-handed. Millard seems totally unfazed though, almost amused by the whole situation. But even with Tim's keys literally in Millard's pocket. There's still no sign of Tim himself. The cops feared he was already dead, but they desperately keep searching for his body or for anyone who might know these two creeps. Now get this. It's while searching March Smitch's house that police stumble upon two huge clues. First, they find Laura Babcock's iPad and duffel bag just chilling in Smitch's bedroom. Who's Laura Babcock, you ask? Well, sit tight, because this mystery is about to blow wide open. While Tim Bosma's disappearance is making national headlines, police get a call from two very distressed parents. Their daughter Laura has been missing too for months. In fact, she disappeared almost a year before Tim. Laura's parents tell police their daughter used to date Dylan Millard. Yup, our killer truck test drive bandit back at it again. Records show the last 8 calls Laura made were to Millard before she vanished. So detectives start investigating Laura's disappearance, fearing Millard and Smitch could be behind this too. Turns out Laura was a straight-A college grad turned drug addict in the months before she went missing. She was couch surfing after her parents kicked her out and barely keeping it together. Laura's ex-boyfriend said the last time he saw her, she was texting back and forth with Millard, trying to hook up. But, plot twist, Millard already had a girlfriend named Christina at the time who knew he was secretly seeing Laura on the side too. No surprise this chick Christina was pissed about their little love triangle. She basically told Millard, "It's me or her. You can't have both of us." And according to Christina, Millard promised he'd take care of the Laura situation for good. And oh boy did he take care of it. Because just days later, Laura Babcock vanished into thin air after a night with Millard. No trace of her left until now. So not only was Laura's stuff in Smitch's house, cell records also show she and Millard were together the night she disappeared, and that Millard took her back to his farm right before her phone stopped making calls for good. To top it off, after arriving at the farm, Smitch takes a photo of something wrapped in a blue tarp, shaped exactly like a human body, something he and Millard later burned to ashes in a homemade high-temperature incinerator. An incinerator specifically designed for burning animal or human remains. But the most damning evidence was right in their text messages. Millard asked Smitch, point blank, "The barbecue is warmed up. Should we do some meat?" Late that night, phone records show Smitch Googled, "What temperature does cremation occur at?" before firing up their sicko torture chamber. So by now it's abundantly clear. Rich boy Millard and his friend Smitch make quite the gruesome serial killer duo. Laura was clearly not the first murder either. While investigating her death, detectives decide to reopen the case of Millard's father, Wayne, who died from a suspicious gunshot to the eyes months earlier. Originally, police took Millard's word that his dad was depressed and killed himself. But now that he's the prime suspect in 2 other murders, obviously that label didn't quite fit. And what do you know? Further tests reveal it couldn't possibly have been self-inflicted. No gunshot residue on Wayne's hands, but plenty on his clothes. Traces of the same exact gun purchased by his beloved son Dylan shortly before his murders. So by now the cops have racked up enough evidence to lock up Smitch and Millard for good for the murders of Tim Bosma and Laura Babcock. And Millard gets slapped with a 3rd life sentence for his dear old dad's death too. But with psychopaths like Millard, you gotta wonder, how many more twisted crimes could they have gotten away with if they weren't stopped? After all, Tim Bosma was just a random truck owner he found online. That could have been anyone's loved one. He clearly had no issue with brutally killing perfect strangers just for thrills. Last anyone's heard, the pair remain unremorseful for their sadistic murder spree and still blame each other for pulling the trigger on poor Tim Bosma. So while Tim and Laura's poor families will never get true justice, at least these 2 homicidal maniacs are off the streets. And the streets of Canada are definitely safer with those crooks rotting in prison.